So today we're going to be talking about rhetorical devices or rhetorical strategies. As writers, we are constantly making choices about what type of evidence, what strategies we're going to employ in order to enhance our argument or in order to make our position stronger. Right. This morning I was listening to NPR, and a woman from the Sierra Club was on talking about the proposed coal terminal in Oakland, right? And she brought in so much statistics and hard evidence and research in order to prove her point, right? Which was that we shouldn't have this coal terminal. This evening, I was listening to the comedian Louis C.K., and he was doing a bit about how young adults today are too whiny, right? That was his claim. That was his argument. And he brought in a lot of jokes and a lot of personal stories and a lot of anecdotes and observations in order to prove that claim, right? And so as writers, and as just people engaging in argument and engaging in discourse, we're constantly making choices depending on our audience and depending on our purpose about what types of strategies, what types of devices and evidence and tools we're going to rely on in order to enhance our position. And really, depending on our audience, our strategies change. Right? The evidence that you would bring in a scholarly, or a research paper is going to be different than the strategies you might employ if you were talking to a friend or a family member. So one big idea is that writers use many types of strategies to make their work compelling or convincing, right? So as a arguer, as a person engaging in debate, you might use personal anecdotes as well as research, as well as humor in order to craft a well-rounded argument. However, we want to be aware of this as writers, right? But for the rhetorical analysis, where we're analyzing other people's writing, other people's arguments, we want to be very aware and tuned into what strategies the other writer, the article that you are studying, the article that you are analyzing is making in order to make a successful argument, right? So, and you're going to be talking about the effects of those choices. So return to the Louis C.K. bit, if I were doing a rhetorical analysis of his kind of argument, right, young adults today are too whiny, I might say, well, really, how is he supporting that? Is that a good argument? What strategies did he bring in? I might say, well, he had some interesting observations, right? He had this observation, and I might analyze the observation, and then I might analyze his jokes, and then I might analyze maybe some of his personal stories that he brings in, all of which contribute to a successful argument. So, of course, as writers, we want to use these strategies, but as analysts, rhetorical analysts, we want to be really aware of the choices other writers are making and how those choices affect a target audience. So let's go ahead and talk about some of these rhetorical strategies. Some are going to be really self-explanatory, and some I will give a bit of an explanation of. So the first one is juxtaposition, meaning two things that are placed side by side, right? We see this in advertisements all the time. For example, if you know some of these weight loss commercials, right, where they have those before and after pics side by side, right, we would say that those images are juxtaposed, or that's a juxtaposition of images. Juxtaposition meaning to place side by side. Another strategy that you'll see often in advertisements is visuals, right? So a compelling visual, right, might really bring us in, like, oh, okay. So those can be quite effective. Not so much. Visuals aren't used too much in scholarly work, but you see them often in advertisements and on blogs. in scholarly work, we often rely on expert opinion, right? I'm sure at this point in your college careers, you've quoted an expert, right? Someone who's an expert in a specific field, and likely you quoted them in a paper, right? That's the strategy you're using is relying on expert opinion to help support a point of yours. Your criteria, right? Criteria meaning standards you're using to make the standards you use to make a judgment, right? So here are my standards. Here's how I'm making this, why I'm taking this position, or this is how I'm coming to this conclusion. Your tone, right? Sometimes you're humorous, sometimes you're level-headed. Sometimes if you're trying to be humorous, that tone sometimes it fails, right? Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes if you're monotone, that can also really hurt an argument. Anecdotes, right? Those are often used, those little personal stories. We often see repetition, right? It really makes it stick something into your head. We see that in advertisement a lot too. A repeated phrase, a repeated little song. Humor, credentials, right? I teach in another class, I teach this book called Generation Me, and right on the cover, the book title is Generation Me, and it says written by Jean M. Twenge, PhD, right? That PhD really enhances the credibility of the book, right? From the very beginning, we're like, oh, okay, maybe we can trust this author in her position. Diction, meaning word choice. Statistics, personal examples, most of these are self-explanatory. Emotional appeals, things that try to make us angry or try to get an audience, feeling some sort of emotion. Analogies, meaning comparisons. Graphs and charts, right? Logical appeals, good old-fashioned logic. Punctuation, wow. Often punctuation, and as a instructor, often punctuation is one of those things that can break an argument, right? Where there's so many misused commas and periods, and I begin to think, this person didn't really take a lot of time with their work, with their argument, right? So, and maybe you guys have experienced this, where you're reading something and the punctuation and grammar is really off, and you're like, I don't trust this person. I'm not buying their argument. Metaphors and similes. Metaphors and similes are also comparisons. Exemplification. Exemplification meaning to be the perfect example of. So Snow White exemplifies the fairy tale, for example. Ethical appeals, things that appeal to ethics. Syntax, meaning the structure of a sentence. Right? Sometimes, again, as an instructor, I'll see students who use the same syntax, meaning sentence structure again and again and again. It kind of becomes monotonous a little bit. So that's another thing that can make or break an argument. Common sense, right? Common sense. Descriptions and observations. Defining your terms, especially when a word is slippery or doesn't have a clear definition, by defining it, that enhances your trust, your credibility, right? Research, which I'm sure you've used, as with quotations, I'm sure you've pulled in a quote in order to prove a point. So some takeaways, as writers, we want to draw on a variety of these strategies to make an effective argument. If I'm putting forward the claim that, CSU East Bay is a wonderful school, that is my argument. Well, and let's say I have to prove this. Well, I would draw on a variety of strategies to prove that point. So I might have the personal testimony of some students. I might also have some graphs and charts that show the percentage of students who get employment directly after graduation, right? I might also have some expert opinion in there, talk to some of the professors at our university. And by bringing in all of these different strategies and using all these rhetorical devices, I begin to have a strong argument, right? Second big takeaway, as we rhetorically analyze arguments, we must identify these rhetorical strategies. and discuss their overall effect on readers. So a question I'll kind of leave you with the Louis C.K. bit. He brings in, his overall claim was, kids today, young adults today, they're too whiny. And he has all these little observations, like he talks about how he's sitting on a plane next to a young adult who has their phone and it's not working, and the guy's so upset that it's not working, and Louis C.K. is telling this story. Well, what effect does that story have on us as audience? Does it make us think something? Does it change our view? Right? Do we relate to it? So I want you to begin thinking about that, how these different strategies work, right? How they begin to have an effect on audiences, how they begin to get us thinking and feeling and believing.